Bow hunting, what romance. Waiting in a blind in the early fall for a deer to come within range, and you're going to hunt like the Indians with a bow and arrow. Today there are 3 basic bows to choose from, and each has its advantages. Bow number 1, the long bow. It's just a stick and a string, the most primitive and simple. Bow number 2, an improvement in the longbow called a recurve, because the ends of the limbs have reverse curves that give extra snap, extra speed to the arrow as the bow straightens out. And bow number 3, the modern compound bow. A complex string system rolls over pulleys or cams, and this kind of bow is the fastest of all. When the string is released and the cams roll over, the arrow builds up speed and whips out of the bow. Compound bows have lots of moving parts and they come pre-strung, but the other 2, you string yourself. Remember the old style of putting your leg between the bow and the string, arcing it and latching the string over the end? Well, that's the worst way to string a bow because it twists the limbs unevenly, and over time you'll deform your bow. A better way is to put one end of the bow under the arch of your boot, pull the bow from the middle, and slide the string over the end. That way the limbs are pulled evenly, but it is more difficult to string a bow this way. The best way and safest is to use a bow stringer. Attach it to both ends, step on it, and pull. Presto, your bow is strung safely without twisting the limbs. Always check your bow visually to see that the string is seated properly, and pull it back to make sure. These 3 bows don't shoot the same arrows. For the longbow, cedar shafts are the most popular because they're traditional, like the longbow. The wood absorbs shock and straightens out fast when it comes out of the bow. But one problem with cedar arrows is that they're not all uniform. Recurve and compound shooters are more likely to choose aluminum shafts. Manufactured to exact specifications, a batch is virtually identical, plus they're stronger than cedar. And the screw-in machine tips allow archers to use a variety of arrowheads and change them. And with cedar shafts, well, they're usually pointed and one head is glued on. A new arrow in the marketplace is graphite. Lighter and narrower, faster speed and better penetration. The problem is they haven't been able to manufacture them with uniform straightness. But when they do, this is the high-tech arrow of the future. Arrows must be matched with the bow so it can handle the acceleration and fly straight. On the traditional longbow, the arrow rests on a shelf and there's quite a bit of friction, which is why longbow shooters use the traditional feather fletching. As the arrow leaves the bow, the feathers fold so the arrow stays on course. A problem with feathers is that they aren't too durable. That's why the modern shooters usually choose plastic vanes instead. They hold up under a lot of abuse, but they don't give as much and they're not as flexible. So on recurves, you'll usually find a plastic arrow rest. It doesn't give as much resistance to the arrows or the vanes. And if you're a high-tech shooter, maybe with an overdraw, you'll want a mechanical arrow rest, one with lots of moving parts so you can adjust it. So there's exact clearance for the vanes. They'll never touch the rest as the arrow leaves the bow. Eliminates the chance of wobble. And the overdraw, well, you can see how it places the arrow rest behind the bow grip, closer to the archer. That allows for a shorter arrow. What's the advantage? Well, shorter arrows are a bit stiffer. They don't torque as much when launched from a high-speed compound, and a shorter arrow can have smaller diameter. It'll be lighter and faster. So quite a few high-tech archers have put overdraws on their hunting bows so they can shoot the faster, smaller arrows. Now what about pulling back the string? 3 ways to do it. The grip we're all familiar with, 1 finger over the top, 2 under. That helps hold the arrow in place, but it can also put pressure on the arrow as you draw it and release it. Some shooters get excited or tense and actually bend the arrow down by squeezing that finger on top. A second way is 3 fingers under, sometimes called the Apache draw. The advantage? Well, you don't touch the arrow. It allows it to leave the string cleaner. And the high-tech answer to all this, a mechanical release. Clip it to the string, pull it back, and touch it off, much like you would a gun. The advantage is consistency. The string is released exactly the same way each time, so there's no doubt shooters who use release aids can consistently be more accurate. And speaking of accuracy, how do you aim these things? The longbow is most often shot instinctively. No sights. The shooter concentrates on the target and through practice learns to hit what he's shooting at. That's instinctive. A lot of recurve and compound shooters use sight pins. The idea is you line up the string with your eye and the sight pin, and if you hold the bow the exact same way each time, you should be able to hit what you're aiming at. Some people anchor at the corner of their mouth with their middle finger. Some use the Apache draw, which puts the arrow higher under their eye. And I learned to use 3 fingers under, anchoring underneath my chin, running the string right up the middle of my nose. I line up the sight pin with the string and my eye, at the same time squeezing my back to hold my bow arm straight and solid, then relax my hand to release the arrow. So here we have 3 different bows, 3 different shooting systems. Which one are you going to choose? Well, how about the high-tech, the compound? There's a couple big advantages. One, it's a very fast shooting bow. The arrows are flat shooting, which means if you misjudge on your sight pins, up to 30 yards, your arrow might only be off an inch or 2. Another big advantage of compounds. They're difficult to pull back. There's 60 pounds of draw weight. Now I'm holding about 30. Once the cams kick over, the energy is stored up there, so they're relatively easy to hold. That's a big advantage for senior archers, handicappers, people with weak arms. So why the interest in long bows and recurves? Well, they're not as fast as compounds, but they're plenty fast for deer hunting. In fact, these are the bows that Fred Bear used after all. So you should choose a bow that you're comfortable with, that you enjoy shooting, and be sure to practice. That's the key to successful bow hunting. Practice, no matter which bow you choose.